Hello, this is George from Ireland. I'm here with Mr. Caul Grant, and we're outside the Royal Courts of Justice in London, where Mr. Grant is protesting. Please tell us, what's your campaign about?
Oh, hi George, good morning. Yeah, the campaign is, first and foremost, we call it Empowerment Mondays. We've been coming out since the 4th of February this year. We conducted a weekly campaign out here back in 2014 to 2016, and then we took a break, and we, as I said, we restarted again this month, last month, outside here since the 4th of February. This is a campaign, hopefully, to highlight the issues surrounding the death of a 15-month-old child of mine who died from dehydration whilst in hospital, and we aim. Sorry. Are you able to edit and things like that?
Yes.
Okay, excellent. Sorry. So we're here to, as I said, highlight the issues surrounding my son's death, but also what has happened to me in the meantime in an attempt to cover up the circumstances leading up to my son's death. And that has included spending up to 6 years and 1 month in prison without being subjected to any due process of law, despite putting applications to appeal, despite applications for a writ of habeas corpus. The judiciary, judges going back from Lord Irvine, Lord Justice Thomas, and currently one of the judges who come to mind immediately, which the public may well be aware of, is Martin Morbick, or Sir Martin Morbick, who's currently chairing the Grenfell inquiry. I appeared before Morbick in 2011 and raised issues of unlawful activities that I'd been subjected to. For instance, as I mentioned, the 6 years that I was in prison, that following a wrongful conviction, I filed an application to appeal against that conviction. That was refused by the first judge. I renewed the application to go into court to have an oral hearing. That is an absolute right. We all have the right to be heard, guaranteed under Article 6. Now, the courts refused me legal aid, so I couldn't afford a lawyer, and they refused me my right to come and represent myself. So basically, they conducted those proceedings without allowing me the right to be heard. Now, so eventually I was released from prison in 2009. In 2011, I appeared before Morbick, as I said, and when I presented the issues of unlawful acts that have taken place against me, he said that even if they wanted to, there's nothing they can do about it. They have to proceed as though the previous proceedings were lawful, and that's totally wrong.
Which laws is the judiciary in breach of here?
So we're talking about Article 5, the right to challenge the lawfulness of your conviction or detention. We're talking about Article 6, the right to be heard. We're equally talking about Article 7, which guarantees no punishment without law. No lawbreaker can be a law enforcer. We're also talking about Article 8, because the right to a family life.
This is all of the Human Rights Act.
All
correct?
Of the Human Rights Act, indeed. And so in fact, also, if we want to go even further back, where most of the rights we have today have come from, founded on the principle of the Magna Carta, Clause 61 of the Magna Carta gives the right to lawful rebellion. Where the state has wronged you and failed to remedy it, you have the right to disobey the law, and so on and so forth. And I think that's further enshrined in Article 7, and that is the reason why they're reluctant to have me in a public arena addressing the issues of unlawful acts that have taken place against me.
How optimistic are you that they'll set things right?
I'm optimistic in that I believe in the rule of law. I believe in justice, and I believe that all that's required for this to be put right, for the state to do what it's legally required to do, is for publicity, is for light to be shone, the disinfectant of sunlight. And I appreciate you taking the time to do this, because this is a way of helping this matter come into to light.
Well, it's scandalous. It's the kind of thing I didn't think was possible. but it shows how naive I was.
George, if I didn't, I'm equally the same as yourself, because prior to what happened to me, I had 100% faith in British justice. And if I didn't have the documentation which I'm able to present outside these courts, I wouldn't expect you to believe that this happened at all.
Are there any public figures so sympathetic?
Whenever I'm out here, I always get a lot of sympathetic reaction from the passing public. But I think everyone, because there's a lot of MPs that are aware of this matter, but they tend to shy away from it because nobody wants to, it would seem, be responsible for the person that kind of pressed that button to cause the necessary publicity, if you like. So everyone tends to shy away. One of the worst public responses that I had was from an MP, Diane Abbott, who basically, at the time I was suing my former lawyers for giving me false advice about the law, and Diane Abbott wrote to me and she said, Bindman and Partners are correct to say that there is no law in this country that allows you to sue for false advice. She went on to say, you must face the fact that nothing will bring your son back. Drop this action against Bindman's and get on with your life. That's what Diane Abbott said to me.
Yeah, I'm a bit surprised because I would have thought she's quite critical of the judiciary.
Yes.
I would have thought she'd be more inclined to be on your side.
Well, you know what I've come to experience over the years, when the cameras are on, when the light's on, these people, they want to portray themselves as being the most honourable and so on and so forth, so that they can continue to get public support when they require us to vote. But behind the scenes, I mean, if I didn't have that letter, you wouldn't believe, no one would believe that she sent that to me. We all know, none of us who ever lost a loved one believe that any degree of justice can bring that loved one back. But does that mean that if our loved one is attacked and stabbed in the street and die for whatever reason, we mustn't pursue any justice? We mustn't pursue answers?
Well, the thing is, you obviously want to prevent the same thing befalling some other family.
Precisely.
Yeah.
Because, the night my son died, my wife brought my 15-month-old son to casualty. She was seen, the baby was seen pretty urgently and by a junior doctor. Now, he thought there was something wrong and he ordered x-rays. In the meantime, he also asked for a senior doctor to come and examine the baby to admit the baby. He had to raise hell to get that senior doctor to come along. When he eventually did arrive, he just said there's nothing wrong with this baby and refused to admit him. Now, the junior doctor told my wife, whatever you do not leave this hospital with that baby. And so they were just left sitting down in casualty for 5 hours before she was eventually told to take him up to a ward. Within an hour of arriving on the ward, he collapsed and died. Now, in the final hour of his life, I walked into the hospital looking for my family, and I was told repeatedly that my son was not there, he only had a tummy upset, he didn't need to be admitted, etc. They had advised me to check the children's section, which I did. There was no record of him being there. I left out of that section. I used the telephone in the hospital corridor to call home to see if I had passed my wife on the way. I got no reply. I went back to the main reception and she said, he's definitely not here. I left the hospital reassured that my son was not there and that he was fine. When I got back home, I received a phone call from my brother-in-law, who was in Margate, telling me that his sister is at the hospital, the baby is not well, and I'm there almost arguing with my brother-in-law, saying, no, they're not there, I've just come back from there. So I've agreed to ring the hospital. I've put the phone down. Immediately as I replaced the receiver, my phone's rang again. This time it's my wife screaming down the phone, get the hell out of the flat, the baby is not well. I slammed the phone down on her, thinking this was a cruel joke being played by her and her brother. Nonetheless, I immediately picked up the phone again, dialed the hospital. Half an hour before my son died, I was still being told, no, Mr. Grant, your son's not here. I pleaded with the receptionist. I told her I've just had 2 very distressing calls. Could you please double check? She checked the first ward, he wasn't there. She went through to the second ward. The receptionist didn't say another word to me. She put me straight through, and the next thing I heard was, oh, Mr. Grant, come quickly, your son's here, he's not well. I rushed back to the hospital. to go and find my son had just died.
Oh my goodness.
And but because of that, because I wasn't there, 5 months after the death of my child, my wife kept blaming me, saying it was your fault. If you was there, you would have made them do something, etc. Eventually, we became separated as a result of that. A year after being separated from my family, my daughter, as I said, was 5 years of age at the time. My wife was pregnant with our third child. I went back to our lawyers and I said I want to sue the hospital for giving me false information which led to me being absent, which has now resulted in the breakup of my 10-year marriage. My lawyers told me in writing that there is no law in this country that allows anyone to sue for false advice. And that advice was false, because the same law which covers negligent actions has also covered negligent advice or information since 1964. That was ruled by the House of Lords. In fact, at the time, I was just desperate. I just wanted to save my marriage. I just wanted to prove to my wife I came and they sent me back. So it wasn't about money or anything like that. I just wanted to be able to have an opportunity to try and save my marriage. And they insisted. In fact, because of how desperate I was ringing other law firms, the Law Society, and they were all telling me, yes, there are laws that can allow you to sue for false advice. They told me, change your lawyers. In fact, one law firm gave me a case precedent to bring to my lawyers, Bindmans, and they refused to budge. It wasn't until my MP at the time, Tessa Jowell, she wrote to the Legal Aid Board on my behalf, asking them to transfer my certificate to another firm who were quite prepared to represent me. And it wasn't until then that my certificate got transferred. Eventually, I mean, this is an unbelievable nightmare. Eventually, the said lawyers who agreed that I had a case and agreed to represent me, as soon as they got this legal aid certificate, they said, oh no, you haven't got a case.
Oh my goodness.
Without doing anything at all. So they didn't do any form of investigation, but by then, that's when the legal establishment began ganging up against me. And again, if I didn't have documentation to confirm all these things, I don't think I could convince anyone of this truth. I would be regarded as a madman,
Mr. Grant, thank you very much for your time.
Oh, thank you,
Wish
George.
you all the best with your campaign.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Thanks.